to another episode of Down the Garden Path. Thank you for joining me here today. Today, my guest is Manny Lavrador. He grew up in Portugal in a farming family where being close to the land was simply part of everyday life. Working the soil, watching the seasons, and being around plants from a young age naturally shaped his connection to horticulture. So now based in Ontario, Canada, he's spent more than 25 years in the nursery and landscape industry, primarily in wholesale nursery sales. Over the years, he has had the opportunity to work closely with growers, landscape professionals, and garden centers, building relationships while continuing to deepen his appreciation and knowledge in plants and trees. And we're going to talk all about native trees today. Welcome to the show, Manny.
Hey, good morning. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure. I'm honored to be here and be part of your show.
Excellent. And you were saying before we were chatting beforehand that your last name, what does it translate to?
Yeah, I come from humble roots. As your bio introduces me, it explains that basically I come from a very humble rural roots in rural Portugal. And my last name actually translates to farmer, and I've kind of always held this deep connection to just the land and plants. And I here at home, I'm just a gardener, and
Yeah.
I can't wait to get gardening. So it's
Oh yes, we're at more snow today, so we're all hoping that that's going to happen.
Indeed. Yeah.
So you've got, being in that side of the industry, which I think is really, we've never talked to anybody in your part. Like I've talked to growers and I've talked to industry, retail people and stuff like that. But I love that you're kind of in the middle between both. And so for our listeners, when we say wholesale nursery, we really mean growers, right? They're growing.
Yeah, that's correct. A lot of what you would call a wholesale nursery in Ontario is predominantly a grower and distributor, whether they have a retail component to their business or they sell specifically to landscape contractors or commercial municipalities, whatnot. The reality is a lot of Ontario growers are just that. They're growers first and foremost. They produce nursery materials, whether that's trees, shrubs, evergreens, grasses, perennials, or they do that, and they also complement quite often with other season merchandising such as annuals and tropicals. But the wholesale side of the business I've been involved with has been predominantly in servicing those that serve the end user, the home gardeners, one way or another. We're all part of a chain that services the home gardener community, really.
Yes.
Big and small. So
yes, exactly. So you've watched, these wholesalers or growers then feed into different levels below them. And obviously one of those is garden centers, right? Where end users or clients, gardeners buy their plants. So you've watched firsthand the increase, right, in the demand or the preference or the conversation around native trees, but right?
Yeah, that's correct. So it's evolved, and it kind of always has. I mean, the reality is, native plants have been part of the discussion one way or another, whether they've been for commercial projects where natives have been spec'd in, or just as of lately, there's been a growing demand for Canadians to plant. The whole invasive discussion, of course, comes into mind. People want somehow people have this idea that a native garden is a low maintenance garden. And I think there's some truth to that. And I think the whole native push, if I call that politely, is a good thing. I think there's lots of opportunity where natives do play a part in whether it be restoring the environment, whether it be beautifying a homogeny of gardens at home. I think there's a place for that conversation, and I think it's. I always go back though to the simple principle though: is it the right plant for the right place? Because at the end of the day, native. I live in a beautiful down part of the valley here in Dundas, and I walk out my door and I'm pretty much native setting. But where you live, native may be quite different. You may live downtown Toronto in a postage stamp lot. Native may not do well there for you. For example, another key component is geographically native. I mean, like we see the spread of Canadian species, for example, and I'll just use like tulip trees and a few other like that, which are Canadian species, or even sassafras. great native plants. But if you're north of the 401 in Guelph, perhaps you'll have a hard time with that native plant this winter. So was that the right plant for you?
Hmm.
So native, yes, native, correct, in the right spot. Native, will it suit the purpose? Native, I don't know. I think I'm saying a lot, but I think I'm a big proponent of native. But let's do the homework. Let's have a discussion. Let's talk about the right plant for the right place for the right setting. And what are you trying to accomplish as a gardener, right? What is your
Right.
goal? And you know that well, Joanne. I mean, you design for many
Mhm.
clients. It always starts the conversation is, well, what are we trying to achieve here? So,
Yes. Yes, and I was saying before the show too that when I visit clients and they say that they're not gardeners and they're not good at gardening and they have a black thumb, my response is always it's really not about you. It's about the right plant in the right place. And nothing is even more so than trees in the right place because plants like shrubs and perennials, you can move them if you made a mistake, right?
mm,
Or you can remove them fairly easily. But trees, like once you plant a tree and it's there. So you really want to make sure you have the right one. What would you say? Well, let's ask. I'm curious about what is the most popular, native tree. Maybe um, are you finding more commercially they're demanding, or homeowners, or both? Different. You can give me two
well,
different ones.
I think we're seeing a lot of demand for like things like Eastern redbud, for example. They're great
Mm,
trees. Like people like the fact they're native in a great flowering tree and also
yeah.
a smaller tree. Although perhaps not a great street tree, for example. I also think that Nativars, which is some of these hybrids have come up as of late, and they've always been part of the market. Perhaps also have opportunity where you can indeed combine the traits of a native tree and all the benefits of a native tree while perhaps having a better behave end result. Like, give an example, like for if you're planting something in your front yard and you close to the house and you want a red maple and you love that fall color and you want something that's going to be in the maple family, there are a bunch of other choices out there like uh, which are much by far dwarfer and go out better behave, won't get in trouble into the wires. Will still give you that great color. The fast growers, and as a matter of fact, in some cases they take all the best traits of the native plant and they've been sort of um, enhanced, if you will, or sort of being crossed and hybridized and grown to a sense where they highlight all the great qualities while removing some of the things that you don't like in that tree. Case in point, seedlings. Like, if you have a hybrid maple, you're not going to have to pull out literally 1,000 maples every year in your garden. So
Yes, yeah. Well, let's go back to that because you just said that what other tree would be good instead of a red maple? You hinted it, but you didn't tell us which
well,
tree.
there are a lot. I mean, so like my neighbor, for example, across the street, he has an Armstrong red maple, something cylindrical, something small, something narrow. So you can go in a small, close-shaped lot. I mean, there's like Frank's Red, for example, which is a new variety that's come out recently.
Okay.
There are a lot of varieties where they offer all the benefits of a red maple, but they're going to do well in the cityscape. They're going to do well
Right.
under a small lot or close to a house or where you wouldn't want necessarily on blaze or a full out red maple because it'll take over the front yard and you have nothing but shade, for example. So if you're an avid gardener and like to have a garden beneath a tree and still have that tree aesthetic in front of your house, why not get a smaller, well-behaved maple and one that's
Right.
cleaner and neater? Just an
Yeah.
opinion, for example. And I'm always careful though because I find that that people or gardeners in general can be in either camp. Like they can really be like it's got to be native all the way, or it's or they don't know what native actually perhaps could be in a setting in an urban setting. So I think as I say these things, I want to make room for everybody. And I
Right.
want to make sure everybody feels that their views are valued and a healthy discussion, a good conversation, where we can, where we can talk about natives in a good, healthy debate that allows you to come up with the best outcome for each individual, right?
Right.
I'm going to very quickly just divert away from trees for a second. And I remember, where in my early years ago, where somebody had a complete native front yard, a rewilding front yard, and the neighborhood was all up in arms because they planted Rebecca Herta, great native plant, by the way, great in a prairie setting, for example, great in a big meadow or
Mm-hmm.
a large property, lots of acres to cover, and you want to do a bit of a meadow prairie planting, for example. But the neighbors were all up in arms because the ravine beside him was covered in Rebecca Herta, and every property up and down the street was covered in Rebecca Herta. And I'm pretty sure neighbors didn't sign up for that. So, where it became a divisive issue, right? Because to a great result. I mean, it looked lovely in their front yard, but some people looked like a bit of a bit of unkept weed field, for example. So there's an example right there where native in the right place, and if you are, for example, a small gardener or want a little bit less maintenance, maybe you want to plant city garden rudbeckia, where it's, you get all the benefits of having a rudbeckia, great flowering power, lots of bloom time, and pretty much flowers from early to late. It's hybrid, it will not seed, which means it will not spread. And it's a nice sturdy plant. It'll stay compact and it won't flop either. So as an example, something that could be a great selection for, a homeowner, a gardener, for example. So maybe, possibly.
Yeah. And it still would be good for pollinators. It just isn't going to seed. So maybe the birds aren't going to eat the seeds, but then they're not the seeds aren't everywhere, but it would still be good for pollinators, right?
It's not always the case with every variety, because sometimes when they're doubles and triples and they have very large complex flower structures, they actually don't do a good job of being a pollinator friendly. So you have to do your homework when it comes to those. There's a lot of examples where the hybridized species have lost the ability to be a great pollinator and a great pollen feeder for bees and whatnot and butterflies. Like, I go back to my own garden, for example. Like, I really have an eclectic mix of plants in the sense that I interfuse natives along with ornamentals for that desired look. And I think, this is more your field, obviously, Joanne. But I have this vision in my head that gardening needs to be intermixed. It's a bit like Christmas tree lights. You need to plant for every season, and it's you don't want to be in the dark and blinded by the light. You want something always kind of coming on. So I have a lot of natives, for example, like early ephemerals, like trims, whatnot, for early on excitement. Like, I get out my door my morning with my coffee, and trims are up. Nothing else is doing anything. Trims in the paddock are, they're doing greatly in my shade gardens, and something to look forward, enjoy, and appreciate in the garden, for example. So a good use of natives, perhaps one that's it extends the gardening season and the enjoyment of a gardening season, right? Where nothing else is doing very much else, for example, right?
Yeah.
Another example would be hazels. Hazels are great. You could plant either native hazel or some hybridized species where you're going to get flowers right now. I go for a walk here in town, and I see the hazels kind of blooming in a few gardens, and it adds popping interest, and bees are going berserk over them, if I can say that politely.
Yeah. No, sorry, did you mean witch hazels or hazelnut trees?
Hazel was witch hazel, yeah, winter hazel.
Witch hazel, okay.
Exactly, yeah. Thanks for clarifying.
No
Anyways,
problem.
There's an example that where you can either use natives or hybrid species for a bit of extending of your garden season and interest, and a bit of color pop, and feed some of the pollinators, early pollinators. Same thing can be done at the end of the season. So, I think garden needs to be a bit like that, where you intermix, natives along with some of your ornamentals for truly a magnificent garden experience. That's my opinion. It's my humble opinion.
Yes. No, absolutely. Just to go back to trees, though. Well, natives specifically also, because I think your unique position, your experience, sorry.
Mm.
Before the boom and all the talk about native plants, the growers had to have already been growing them. So do you, right? Because it takes that long, to get things to market kind of. But do you feel like they've always been growing them? I kind of think that like, they've always been growing them, but just the end user wasn't buying them. And now the end user is buying them. Is that the case?
Well, that's a great question. I've always found that the growers have always done a good job of growing natives. I mean, the reality is you go into any one nursery garden center and find red twig dogwood or gray dogwood or because I suggest a few other things. The reality is they've always sold sugar and silver maple and red oak. That they've always done that. I think the right to consumer, like the way we see the way that marketing is done, branding is done, is that you're not going to be able to walk into a garden center or having a now perhaps or a nursery and say, here's my native section. Everything native is here, this one little block.
Yes.
So I think it's in the layout. I think it's the way we promote it to the home gardeners, where you walk in and you're going to be greeted by, if you're buying shrub roses, here's roses, or if you're buying hydrangeas, here's hydrangeas, or if you're perhaps purchasing fruiting shrubs and bushes, they're going to be in one section. Well, so natives, they kind of paint all over the scale, like, if you know what I mean. Like,
right.
So if you walk to the nursery, you're going to be in every sort of nursery or garden center department table on the floor display, where you'll see natives a bit everywhere.
Yeah.
But you almost need to sign and say, hey, I've been here for forever. I'm a native. I'm a red twig dogwood. I'm native.
Yeah.
So it's a good example.
Yeah. I think that's true too, because I think, perennials, I think of, they were always like those sad plants on the shelf way back there. Like those are the natives, right? And now they are becoming, because for perennials anyway, many, not all, but many of the perennials don't necessarily show that great in a pot, right? Like they meant to be out in the ground. So that is a disadvantage. That I think has been a disadvantage. So they're always on that shelf, looking kind of sad, and nobody's buying them. But I think people are finally looking past that and looking more for the fact that it's native than judging it from what it looks like in the pot. Don't you think?
Absolutely. And I think we're all guilty of that impulse.
Yeah.
Look how pretty this is. Like, look at the blooming flower. I mean, geez, I think that's how we all went. It's perhaps how we end up at a $25 hydrangea from Costco, because it's just so big and beautiful. And I think I see people buying those, and I wonder, like, it's what are you going to do with that, right? But the reality is, you're right. Some native plants have a season of interest, and they have a dormancy period. And I think the challenge is, from a retail perspective, perhaps from a sales perspective in general, from the impulse buying of those plants, is unless you're going to come into a location saying, here's my list of natives, what I'm looking for, they might not be on display, because good example, I'm going to go back to trilliums and some of those early spring ephemerals.
Yeah, trilliums, yeah.
You're going to be buying a dirt pot. So if you want native trillium in your garden, you're going to go into a nursery or garden center, and unless it's early April and May, the rest of the season, they may not even be on the floor, because you're now buying rootstock.
Yeah.
And I think that's perhaps somewhat unappealing at times for the average consumer.
Because they're also not cheap. Because they're not easy to grow, right? So some of the native plants can be a little on the pricier side, because they're not as easy to hybrid, like to grow, or I shouldn't say to grow, but what's it called? Like when I say grow, I mean in your own garden, it's easier, but to mass produce. I
think it's about economies of scale. Absolutely. Yeah. And I think, most growers will go what the market demands and wants. So there will be a need for ramping up, I guess, as demand continues to grow and more sort of mainstream, if I can use that term politely. There are a bunch of Ontario-only native growers pretty much who that's all they do now, and they've seen a boost in business. And I think it's a great movement. I think it's a great movement. I think it's, but at the end of the day, it comes down to like, what kind of gardener are you? How much time do you have? How much investment do you want to put into this? What is the end
Yeah.
result? Um, you know, there's a large component of conversation, education, understanding what you like to do as far as ultimate outcome, and I think you can have amazing results. I think you can really have amazing results. I also think there needs to be an opportunity um, for the right approach. I think, and I'm in favor of it. I like to see more of it, but I also like to see a smart discussion around the topic. And
Yeah.
um, you know, I
Now, wait, going back to trees, or we just hop back to trees
yeah,
again. So, and I think when you ask people about a native tree, of course, for Canada, the first thing that's going to come to mind is a maple tree.
yeah,
But there are other good native trees. I know you mentioned the red bud, which is an excellent tree, and I have been using those more in designs as well. Um, but do you have a couple other native trees that you can speak about?
absolutely. I mean, the reality is that there is a large list to pick from. Everything
Hmm.
from the mighty red oak. There's obviously going to be a variety of maple, silver maple, sugar maple. Those are iconic Canadian symbols. Every tulip trees are great trees. I mean, I hike quite a bit as an individual, and I'm often in the woods, and I'm always walking around. Kind of, I've become that annoying. Oh, look at this! Is a hickory, or like, well, look at that! It's a sassafras tree. I mean, most people go, "What does that even mean?"
Yeah.
I mean, there's some very unique stuff out there. Like, I think you're seeing some big interest, for example, in pawpaws,
Yes.
which is something that I wasn't even aware until about 10 years ago. Until here's a unique tree that it produces a very delicious fruit. I've actually tried it. It's quite interesting enough.
Have you? Oh,
I
that's
have, yeah.
excellent.
It's an interesting combination between. I probably put somewhere between strawberry, mango, banana kind of flavor, a bit citrusy sometimes. If you pick
Yeah.
it, if it matures enough. It's got these incredible seed pods. I'm actually growing some from seed in my own garden to give out to friends. But yeah, I mean, there's so much cancer selection in Ontario. I mean, and we're so lucky here, like especially where we are in the escarpment where I am. Um, Whether you're going to see some pawpaws, further into Western Ontario, or if you're going to walk down by Coots Paradise and you have sassafras grow. I mean, it's so uniquely diverse here that there's so much to see and offer. Um, but again, a lot of these trees they prefer to live in a either understory protected,
Hmm.
um, you know, back to the right place, back to the right tree,
Right.
right place. Like
Exactly. Exactly.
but it prefers to be in the edge of a forest, just a bit
Okay.
protected, a bit more sheltered. Um, I found that, for example, sassafras, they're a bit of a community tree. They like to live in a grouping of trees.
Oh,
They don't
okay.
do all that well by themselves. I tried for
Okay.
many years to go one in my own backyard, and I'll be honest with you, I was successful.
Okay.
And I'm an industry guy, I'm a nursery guy. I think I know what I'm doing. Perhaps I don't.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
Yeah, and that's a perfect example, right? It's not all about the person, it's about the right place and the right spot. And if you
yeah.
couldn't make it grow, giving every, and I feel the same, right? Um,
And there's lots of
yeah.
local challenges here. I mean, I'm in Dundas, and I can tell you that the soil is a bit more porous. A lot of what we call Dundas potatoes locally, as all those
Okay.
rocks. And I happen to have a lot of neighboring black walnuts, which are also native, but not a fan favorite of mine because of how messy they are.
Yeah.
It limits what I can grow. So as a gardener, here's one I don't like particularly because it's in my
Yeah,
own
yeah.
backyard.
I don't
So
either. I think that is as a landscape designer, I think that is one of my biggest challenges with native trees is that most of them either will get very large or they want the space or they want something like you said, the sassafras wants other, trees around them. But our typical suburban homes and gardens and yards, and especially anything that's newly being built, there's no room for that, So if the homeowner can only buy one tree for their backyard, they can't, a red maple or red oak may not be the right tree, right? Correct? And so one is, do you agree? And two, what do you recommend for smaller yards potentially?
Well, so it comes down to what's the ultimate goal of the tree is going to do. Is it going to be to provide shade? So if it's a shade tree, you need something substantial in size. There are pared down varieties of a lot of these fully grown trees these days, where you can, for example, if you can't grow a tulip tree, but you want something a little bit more narrow, like Emerald City tulip tree, for example, is something that's a little bit more compact. It's sort of a bit more pyramidal and still is a significant size tree. You can do you can obviously do a lot of oaks come in all kinds of sort of skinny alternates, if you will. I mean, the reality is nowadays is you can pretty much find a skinnied up version of almost any given tree, whether that was going to be a poplar or ginkgo. By the way, I love ginkgos because they're indestructible.
Yeah,
the living fossil is a unique tree by many ways. But the reality is, you can, we used to call them in the industry cigar-shaped trees. It's a bit of a namesake because they're very narrow and upright, and they provide that the idea of a tree in your property. If you're trying to just get privacy, if you're trying to,
yes,
if you're trying to get privacy from a neighbor's window, blocking a back of somebody's house or an ugly building down the street, whatever it may be, sometimes those narrow trees fulfill. Planting in sets of 3s or 5, whatever multiples you'd require, or even in a hedgerow or line, they can provide that block and that quiet the neighborhood and privacy you're looking for. And like I said, maple, oak, birch. Mean, every genus out there now, you're going to find some sort of upright, narrow version of that tree.
So those would be a nativar, right?
Exactly.
Where they've altered the native plant to just create a different feature, and one of them is the size, the shape.
Exactly. And so ultimately you're going to get something that's going to fit your yard. There are also, I know people don't speak a lot about crab apples these days, but there are some crab apples, for example, which are still great trees. They're diminutive, they're ornamental. They're sort of the medium tree range, for example. I also think you could use things like Acerocraceum is a great tree. I have one in my yard. It's a clump. But you can also
say that one again, slower.
Paperbark maple.
Paperbark maple. Oh, yes, you're saying the botanical name fast for me. Yes, a paperbark maple. I have used those in designs, and I regret not planting one at my house.
Mm-hmm. And a little bit slower growing, they will eventually become a nice, beautiful, focal point tree. They look like a tree. They'll have that graceful either a canopy or, the other thing, of course, is multi-stems. There's a bunch of varieties you can buy in multi-stem, whether it be a birch, for example, or even serviceberry, or there's dogwoods like Cornus lord, like a native white dogwood would be a great example. There's some diminutive trees that can work in almost any kind of spot if you're really tapped out for space. Like Canadian serviceberry comes in tree form, shrub form. That's a native, and that's a smaller tree. A couple added benefits if you're a birder, for example. Like, here's a tree that's going to give you lots of interest. You're going to get a spring flower, a beautiful white, profuse white spring blossom. You're going to get a red berry. It's edible. You can enjoy and eat. The birds will probably beat you to it, but if you're a birder and if you like pollinators, it's certainly going to attract those. And it's graceful. You can have this graceful winter bark interest in how it sort of gently accumulates snow over the winter. It can be rather poetic. So a great tree for a smaller spot, for example, and it's native, and even those they have other solutions that have come out of the hybridization programs that where you can get some incredible, like Robin Hill, for example, or if you're looking at something it's a little bit more well behaved, I would think like Spring Flurry would be an example of an Amelanchier of a variety that's been hybridized. So it'll give you that all those details, but still very ornate and very very well behaved tree, for example. So again, you can combine all the benefits of native along with well behaved tree that's going to fit well to the space.
Right.
Through my travels in Europe, like I see this being used more so than ever. Like, but it's hedging. Instead of a fence or where hedging is such a big thing, or beach or even exfoliate trees, like where nature's been put to work, where it really does the job of accentuating a spot or creating that privacy or that focal point in the garden. Like there's so much that can be done. And I think quite often plants are that solution. There's pretty much something for every desired outcome, I would think. And I think it's really just, what is your vision? What is your needs? And I think plants kind of can fill that gap just about anywhere.
Right. What about evergreens? Like, again, like the Eastern white. Like, I think when people think of native, or I always think of a painting, right, with a big, a group of 7 painting with the white pines, like the painting behind you, even, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So, can you speak a bit about some of the native evergreens?
Well, so we're here in Ontario, where we're surrounded by a lot of choices, and there's obviously quite a bit out there to be in nature. There's really a large amount of evergreens grown in Ontario. There's a lot of white cedar throughout Ontario, obviously. White pine, the iconic white pine, the group of 7, that's kind of recognizable driving down as you go down to the weekend at the cottage or up north. It's just so much what we are, part of our iconic landscapes. There really is a wide array of choices out there. I think a lot of people unfortunately haven't got the spot for something quite that large, or necessarily the time. The years it takes to get those trees to those sizes. So for privacy purposes, the reality is people are using cedar a lot of cedar and juniper using for hedging, and that's quite common, whether it be clipped or natural. Having been in the industry and sold thousands upon thousands of emerald cedars, I'm not a huge fan of that tree particularly. I think it's a very nice commercial tree to sell. The reality is people want that beautiful conical shape. But probably not the best tree for snow snow belt, and it's unfortunate that we, often you see these plantings fail. It's not necessarily
urban settings. Tree. Yeah, I really like the black cedars. I try to gear my clients to black cedar. What do you? I know it's not the same emerald cedar shape, but I feel like it's a little bit more lush, and it will make a nice hedge.
Yeah, and you get the dark green tone that you get with dark cedar. You don't get as much seed head. It's a little bit better behaved, darker green. But there's also a lot of new choices out there. Like there's a lot of new varieties that come out of programs where you're going to see things like even placatums, which is like Spring Grove or Green Giant, or there are all kinds of other varieties like North Pole's ones coming out lately. So there are some new varieties coming out which kind of enhance what emerald cedar was, and I still think if you want something that's going to be tough and hardy and low maintenance, you can do the white cedar. You can prune those into a hedge. You can let those go naturally. Yeah. You'll get something predictable. The black cedar is probably the next best thing for something that's going to be easy to grow. And it's going to provide results in almost anywhere. Without getting too deeply into the whole discussion on hedging and cedars, I think ultimately it's about preparation and the spacing between them and the maintenance that goes in after them. I think a lot of people see frustrating results from cedar hedge planting sometimes because it's not a one and done kind of scenario where you simply you need to take a trench, you need to humidify, you need to prepare the soil, you need to plant them to the right depth, and you need to certainly give them proper spacing. And then you need a watering regime to get them established, and you have to get into the first winter, no matter what you plant. I think a lot of times it comes down to the preparation and the maintenance comes after it. But yeah, cedars are a great option, instead of a fence or for privacy or for added privacy, because we all know sometimes you need more than 6 feet of height when it comes between you and your
Right. And sometimes people have a fence and they hate the fence, so they want to cover the fence, right?
Exactly. So,
so I have a question about emerald cedars. So I feel like, yes, they are technically native to Ontario, but a lot of them can be, a lot of the ones you might be getting for, let's say, a deal, not naming names, at the beginning especially at the beginning of the season, weren't necessarily grown in Ontario, right? They've been grown elsewhere, and that is a contributing factor to their lack of hardiness. When if they were grown here, they'd be hardy. That's something. I mean, I could be completely off base, but that's something I've heard.
Well, no, I think you're right. I think it's if you're planning early in the spring and it's summer and you have a good maintenance program, regardless of where they come, they're going to adapt, they're going to adjust, and they're going to grow well for you, predominantly. And I think you may even have burlap protect in the first year. It depends what kind of winter you have as well, and whether or not they go into winter dry. The reality is, if you have a brand new planting, a large hedge, I recommend you give it a good soaking before it freezes up. You have to lock in that moisture because a lot of these evergreens they come alive in the winter and they soak up all the moisture out of the ground. They're photosynthesizing all winter long, and so they need to replenish that moisture. And what happens at the base of every evergreen? No matter if it's raining sideways, it's going to be dry there. Like it's just you never get water at the base of an evergreen very well. So, and if you're doing a late planting, definitely do an Ontario grown cedar. Do something that's been here and hardened off here. I don't think hardiness is necessarily the issue. It's getting them established.
Okay.
It's also where you put them, right? If you have a predominant open field or like an open north wind, they're going to get winter burn and wind blasted, I can't, a bit of a joke, and, I hope I'm not offending anyone by saying this. I over the years, I can't tell you how many times I got pictures from clients of cedars that they said, well, they didn't do well. And I look at the pictures and the deer have eaten right down to the stems.
Right.
So there's always that as well. And ultimately, they don't like salt. So if you're in a salt facing wind driven location where they're going to be sprayed on, it's not a matter of hardness. It's again, I hate to sound like a broken record, but you really have to do your homework and make sure that is the right plant for your site.
Yeah.
The right plant for
or that spot, right? Like that spot. Sometimes people want symmetry, but the one next to the front door should not be a cedar because of the salt it may get, right?
And shade and sun and all these other things. I mean, the reality is there's a lot that goes into it's why people like you are so much part of the education that goes on to how to deliver a vision. And I think the idea you just brought it up. I think selling the concept of privacy and what will work for you here. Is it a white? Is it a black? Is it an emerald? Is it something else? Because you have that knowledge. You can then say to the customer, well, I'm going to give you privacy, but it's going to look like this because the reality is you probably shouldn't have an emerald cedar in this location. As an example, so that's something I'm sure you do all the time, Joanne. Sell a concept.
Yeah, exactly. Sell a concept and educate. I mean, which is why I love doing the show, right? Is because I love educating people on the process, on the history or the background of why we do what we do, right? And so yes, I was looking forward to, talking to you from that standpoint where you're kind of, you see what's going on with the end user, the gardeners, but also what the growers are doing, and the plant development as far as choosing nativars that may be better for your spot, because not everybody has room for a large native maple tree.
Yeah. And if you do, that's awesome. I mean, if you have the right setting and you have lots of space and you want to plant natives and you want to, naturalize, rewild. I mean, throw any additional term I may have forgotten in there. I mean, obviously you're the right location for that, and let's do this. I mean, I'm all on board. I'd love to help you. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'll be honest with you. I think some of the jobs I've done over the years, like, when you go and you hike in a park that you were part of a planting, 15, 20 years ago, and you're hiking in there, whether that's the Downsview Park in downtown Toronto, or that's some other city park, I don't know, City View Park in Burlington, something you've been part of, and you not get to hike it in a woodlot or forest or a trail system that you've been part of. It's a great sense of pride for me, to tell my kids, hey, I play a small part in this. I help, in some small way shape this.
Mm-hmm.
It's a great sense of pride I have. And the same pride happens to me when people come years later that purchase from you and say, what, that tree you sold me, it's doing phenomenal. I love it. Or
I know. I love that too.
Or you get occasional messages saying, thanks for that advice. I've always asked 21 questions sort of idea. I remember early on, and I've never done a lot of retail sales in my day, but I remember early on people would come over and say, I'm looking for a blue spruce. And I was like, okay, well, where's it going? Are you taking yourself? Are you bringing a contract to install this tree? And they're like, why 21 questions? Just show me the blue spruces. And I'm like, well, because I want you to be happy with the outcome. I want you to understand your needs and what's your picture here? Because at the end of the day, I want to ensure success. So
yeah. Oh, that's a very good point. Yes, and that shows you good knowledgeable people will ask all those questions, because what you may want might not be what you need in that spot, right? So it's really important for us to, and I know all of us, that's one thing about the horticulture industry, right? Is we really want to make the right decision for clients, and we really want to them to be successful. I think none of us want a tree to die or a plant to die, right? We all want you to be successful. So, even so, I think our message for the show is, yes, native, but you still need to make sure that it is the right tree for the right spot. It's going to be the right size. You're going to be able to do the maintenance, like you said, the watering with the cedars, the maple keys. If you really do want one of those messy maples, right? You have to appreciate that. So yeah.
And the best kind of PR is success. When people have success in gardeners, they become a customer for life.
That's right.
I feel that way. It's an itch you can't scratch.
Right.
If you don't mind, I want to flip the script on you a little bit. I mean,
sure.
You're probably closer to clientele and the sort of the direct end user. Like, what are people saying these days? Like, I'm always sort of avid to learn and to understand. And much like this whole native movement, like, what are you seeing next? What are the trends these days? Like, what does gardening look like these days?
I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head as far as pyramidal. Like, I think narrow trees. And as much as social media and the media might be saying native, I don't get as many, especially when it comes to trees and shrubs, maybe more perennials. There seems to people want some perennials that are native, but for the most part, I think they want the tree that's going to either provide them the shade, provide them the privacy, but not get too big and not be too much maintenance. I think the first words out of every person I speak to is low maintenance. So way before somebody talks about native, and I have my little joke about, I don't design with plastic plants, and plastic plants aren't low maintenance because you have to wash them. So, so I think the low maintenance, and I think things like native like narrower plants or slower growing trees are lower maintenance in my client's eyes. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, thank you for flipping the squid. Nobody's done that before.
Do you mind if I ask one more?
Sure.
So I noticed that, and this has been a bit of a growing trend for the past 5 years. Branded plants, they spend a tremendous amount of money on marketing. I mean, you cannot open a magazine, or if you're on LinkedIn or somewhere, you're not going to be fed some sort of an ad for some sort of branded plant programs, whether that's the blue pot, the red
Yes.
pot, the yellow pot. I'm not going to name any names, but the reality is, I
Right.
think we're seeing a lot of that. Are your customers coming in and saying, "I want this specific plant from this specific breeder grower"? Like, like, are they asking for specifically those? In I know we're no longer talking about, because
Yeah. 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 They're
the
not. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. I think well, when I did work at a garden center, that's where I kind of started my career. So I think, those blue pots, we did have clients coming for those back in the day. Um, but my design clients, when I go to people's homes, I don't feel, and I think partly it's because there's no gardening magazines anymore, right? So I think by losing the gardening magazines, I don't feel that clients are as educated on those brands, to be honest, because then
Mhm.
now they're not really seeing the branding until they get in the store.
Okay.
So I do not have clients, they may say they want hydrangeas, but they're not asking me for a specific type of hydrangea. I saw bathtub, is it bathtub? I believe bathtub hydrangea at Landscape Ontario, and I fell in love with it. So I'm going to talk to them about it.
Yeah.
But I don't see that to be, and that's just my perspective. And I think it's because where even social media, I don't know. I don't know if I know I try to promote certain plants, especially my favorites.
Mhm.
But I still think, the words out of their mouth are low maintenance.
Okay. And so then you must have, I mean, one of the things I did for many years is I work a lot with designers and landscapers, and they have sort of a go-to list, right? So that's like,
Yes.
you update your go-to list like every couple of years, like what's the tried and true, or like how's that work
I
for
do.
you?
I mean, I have a pretty good sized garden, and I tend to plant them and try them out before I start using them for a design because it might say that it blooms, like the reblooming lilacs. I needed to test, like, is it really going to rebloom in my yard? My husband's allergic to lilacs, so he wasn't impressed with my experiment, but I did it, right? But then I replaced it with something else to see. So I do a little, I mean, I can't test everything, right?
Mm,
But I do have my go-to things. My preference is hydrangeas, so I'm always testing out the latest and greatest, Firelight Tidbit and Little Lime Punch made it into my garden last year for me to try out. Little Quickfire is by far, like, of all the, I probably have gone through 12 to 15 varieties of hydrangeas in my yard, and I still come back to Little Quickfire
okay.
as my favorite. So I do kind of, again, I can't try everything. I want things that are gonna, for designs, bloom for a long time for my clients and be low maintenance, and nothing else fits other than hydrangeas, really. The
Right.
seasonal interest, that type of thing. So that is a main one. I'll test out perennials and stuff too, some new varieties, but yeah, and not much. Evergreen wise, like dwarf evergreens and things. I've tried, spreaders and things I've tested out.
Hmm.
Does that
That's
help?
awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah.
And I know we didn't touch much on the invasive list, but the reality is, there's also, it's an opportunity where the nativars will offer, where you can go
Yes.
guilt free. For example, burning bush. There's a seedless variety now that you can go guilt free, where it's not going to take over, the local. So I think we're all thinking the same way. I think we're all
Yeah.
thinking about, what's best for the gardeners and what's best for the outcome, what protects the environment, what protects, the local native landscape, and
Right.
we're all thinking the same way, which I think is awesome. I think is perhaps the best of both worlds. It's sort of where everybody gets their cake and can eat it too. So.
That's right. That's right. That's interesting you mentioned the seedless. So have seedless burning bushes been around for a while? Because I took out my barberry because of the birds. I mean, I was like, but the birds love it. Yes, I get it now. The birds are spreading it.
Mm-hmm.
But I do have one. It's tucked in a corner. It's kind of a little bit ignored, burning bush, but I don't get any seeds on it, and it's never popped up elsewhere in my garden. So could I have bought one that was seedless years ago?
I'd have to look it up. I think Fireball is currently the only one that's seedless at the moment, but there
Okay.
may be others. It could also
Yeah.
be genetics. I mean, it's funny. I mean, the other day, genetics are a bit of a funny thing because plants can develop them on their own. A lot of what you see out there sometimes is not always driven by lab-grown plants or lab-induced quality. Sometimes it happens in nature, like a sport. Right,
Yeah.
A great example of that would be, dwarf Alberta spruce, where it's, occasionally you get
there's nothing I feel strongly enough. I feel strongly about that one.
Yeah. But it can revert, and it was a sport at one point, which means it kind of naturally occurring. So
yeah.
That's the fun part about nature. You as much as we try to control that, it's going to do its own thing. It's gonna. I don't want to say
Absolutely.
but certainly reimagine itself. So
yeah,
plants are fun for you that way.
Yeah.
Maybe you.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you so much for joining me here on the show. It was good to talk. It's always good to talk to somebody in the industry, like that loves trees as much and shrubs and I'm sure you found it fascinating. Just I love that your job is being able to see both sides of things and and work with the growers as well as with the meeting the needs of the clients. So good luck with the season.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure. I've had lots of fun, and absolutely, it's delighted. Anytime I can talk plants.
Excellent. Yeah, it might be good to talk invasives the next time. So, because that's a whole other show. We touched a little bit on it, but yes, it's a whole other show. So thank you, Manny, for joining me, and thank you, listeners, for joining me down the garden path. And we'll see you next time.
See ya. Thanks.